In recent years, we have seen time and time again, policing getting it manifestly wrong on so many levels. Orders being given to police officers, just arrest them. That policing was in very stark contrast to the policing of the riot in Harehills in Leeds a few weeks earlier. It's two-tier policing. Starmer lazily labelled everybody who got involved in the recent riots as being far right. The next connotation is that they are inherently racist.
If they police the way that they might want to, they're going to get killed by a stampede of people. Is it like, what can we do? There's too many now.
I think it's a deliberate suppression of free speech. I do not want people with penises in the same toilet as my wife.
I think you can get arrested for that if someone reported it.
If that government wants to call me racist for espousing those concerns over the safety of me, my family and my fellow citizens of the UK, of every race, colour, creed and sexuality, you go ahead.
Now you speak often about issues you see in the police. One of the things we keep hearing, and it's become almost a cliche, two-tier policing. What does that actually mean? What is the accusation there?
First and foremost, let me say, I love policing. You know, my wife did over 30 years. So under our roof, there's over 50 years policing experience. And you don't get it out of your DNA very easily. Policing stays with you if you've done the length of service that my wife in particular did and I did. So I love policing. I have a passion for it, and I'm a fervent critic of it when they get it wrong, because I love it so much. And whenever I'm with police officers, I'll ask the difficult questions because I love policing so much and because it's so important and because they should get it right. But in recent years, we have seen time and time again, policing getting it manifestly wrong on so many levels. And so to answer your question about two-tier policing, I've been saying for many, many years, there is inconsistent policing. In fact, it would be kind of bonkers if there wasn't inconsistencies in policing in some regards. For example, a PC that's come out of training school and has a couple of weeks service and gets called to a park to deal with a couple of ruly kids on bikes, for example, will probably deal with that situation completely differently from a 25-year veteran police officer who gets called to the same type of event. That is understandable, it's almost to be expected, and it can be forgiven, I'm sure, as long as both officers deal with it properly.
Yeah.
And that can be differently, differently can also be dealing with it properly. But now what we see, and if we rewind to very recent events, the gathering that took place, or the protests that took place in Whitehall and around Downing Street on the Wednesday after the Southport murders, those horrendous butchering and murdering of those sweet young kids. We saw very, very robust policing. I'm a fan of robust policing as and when it's appropriate and necessary. We did see very robust policing there.
What kind of thing?
Well, if we saw that the overwhelming majority of the police officers were in their full public order kit, helmets, colloquially known as riot gear, they're all in that with the shields and what have you. And we see, because people have filmed it and put it out there, orders being given to police officers, just arrest them, just go and arrest people, because they clearly objected to the assembly that was going on. There was some idiotic and illegal behaviour by people there, same as there was during the riots. If you throw a brick at a police officer, you're an idiot, and I have no sympathy for you, and you get what you deserve. And likewise with so much of the other idiotic behaviour at the rioting. But we see that. So that policing was in very stark contrast to the policing of the riot in Harehills in Leeds a few weeks earlier, when a double-decker bus got burnt out, and that all stemmed from the police forcibly taking a child into care and other children from a home. Now, on that occasion, I accept those police officers in Leeds, very different police service, completely different part of the country, were not prepped and expecting that kind of reaction. So they didn't have their public order kit, their helmets, their shields and all that to hand. But if you just look at those two situations where there were very public images of the police in Leeds running away from rioters, and then police officers from the Met all kitted up running towards people who were protesting, it's no surprise that people go, this is inconsistent. Or, as you've said, the phrase, which is the phrase of the day, almost, it's two-tier policing. So I get it, why people feel that way.
There was just to summarise, there is a belief then among a lot of people now that the police, but not just the police, I would say the politicians, Keir Starmer, seem to go a lot easier on rioters who are immigrants than ones who are British citizens.
Yeah, exactly. As Starmer lazily labelled everybody who got involved in the recent riots as being far right, with just a lazy, broad brush stroke. And of course, there is a method in his madness, isn't there? By labelling everybody as far right, the next connotation is that they are inherently racist, as opposed to possibly having well-held concerns about the levels of unfettered illegal immigration into the country and concerns about the rise of Islam, particularly fundamentalist kind of Islamic beliefs and actions. No, it's far easier to be a lazy politician and paint everybody as far right.
Is some of this then a feeling maybe from Starmer, maybe from all politicians, maybe from the police, that this has gotten so out of hand with regards to Islam? I mean, we saw during the pro-Palestine marches, for example, there were many times where it looked like if they police the way that they might want to, they're going to get killed by a stampede of people. Is it like, what can we do? There's too many now.
Yeah, with regards to the pro-Palestinian marches, I'm utterly convinced that such offences like shouting genocidal chants were allowed to carry on because the police simply didn't have the numbers of officers there.
Yeah. And so then they explained what jihad meant to us. They were trying to say jihad means peace.
Moral striving, isn't it, against, failings and all that game. Yeah, righto. I'm sure that was the context in which people were chanting it. Yeah, I really think it was not. However, what we have seen in very recent times, particularly with regards to the riots, nationally, 6,000 police officers were mobilised in the blink of an eye and then strategically placed around the country to initially quell and then deal with any other flare-ups of that rioting. Good. I'm glad that happened. I'm glad the rioting was brought to a close before anybody lost their life, for example, and before it got out of hand, and before the levels of criminality and damage reached those levels that we saw in 2011 with those riots, which were far more widespread, created much more damage and financial loss to countless
the Tottenham
people.
riots?
Yeah, it started in Tottenham and then, of course, spread throughout London and further, much further afield. So I'm glad that mobilisation happened. I'm glad the riots were fairly swiftly brought to an end. That's all fine by me. But then, of course, we also saw 7,000 police officers mobilised from the Metropolitan Police to deal with the recent Notting Hill Carnival, which, on many regards, turned once again into utter lawlessness, with 8 stabbings, somebody still critically ill in hospital, fighting for their life, dozens of weapons seized, dozens of over 300 people arrested for a whole variety of other crimes, and people lying in hospitals fighting for their lives.
And this was not the far right.
but it hasn't been described by anybody, has it?
No.
As other than a wonderful carnival of cultural expression and experiences for people, right? We haven't had any broad brush labelling of an orgy of criminality, for example. We haven't heard any politicians saying that, when perhaps they could do.
No thugs.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, Notting Hill Carnival is, forgive me if I'm wrong, is sort of all different classes, but it has become a bit of a woke, liberal elite kind of place to go to.
Yeah, and I know some mates of Caribbean origin who go there, and it's really important to them.
Yeah,
it really is, because they reconnect with a culture and a land that they left many years ago to come here and contribute to British life. In fact, one mate in particular who rose through the ranks to be a senior police officer, hugely respected, brilliant detective, and couldn't have done anything more with his life to make this country a better place. It's really important to him to go to Carnival and connect. And I see all his photographs and we exchange messages and all that kind
lovely.
of stuff. So it's really important to some people. And I get it. I get the fact that it is a cultural event for so many people. And I wouldn't want to see it cancelled in any way, shape or form at all. But what I would like to see is it moved to Hyde Park, which is really just down the road. And then, of course, it could be a ticketed event. The security could be much more strident without being heavy-handed. And it would be a lot easier to manage people within a designated space, as opposed to the streets of Notting Hill, where people can turn one corner through another alleyway, through another street.
Yeah.
And
that would be a shame, though. It is quite beautiful going down those little cobbled lanes and all these little streets and things. But I get what you're saying. But
but there could be an almost, you wouldn't lose the processional element of the carnival by moving it to Hyde Park. There are already roads in Hyde Park and bridleways and such like. But of course, it's 2024. So false, there's tracking roads which are laid for so many festivals and such like, could be laid so that whole processional carnival element of the event is not lost. But, and funnily enough, one senior police officer, in fact, the police officer in charge of the Met Police operation to police Carnival, a deputy assistant commissioner called Adi Adelakan, he came forward and was very strident in what he said about the violence and the unacceptable levels of crime, which I thought was good on his behalf to speak up and be quite strident about that. And if the Metropolitan Police wasn't so besmirched over race, only recently, yet again, described as institutionally racist organisation, albeit the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police doesn't want to use that description for some idiotic reason. And just a few days ago, 10 black and brown Met Police officers going to the BBC and saying it is rife with racism. And they were telling stories that I was shocked at, and I was somebody who was there in the 70s, the 80s and the 90s when some of the racism was utterly appalling.
So it does have a race problem in the police, you'd say?
Clearly the Metropolitan Police does have. And I can't believe it, because it surely must be one of the most easiest issues to fix. But the Met Police is just lurching from crisis to crisis to crisis, including today, the news breaking that another Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with a number of rapes, coercive control, kidnap, and all manner of dreadful, dreadful charges. Innocent till proven guilty, but another Met Police officer that's going to stand trial soon.
So if this a sort of institutionally racist organisation, the police, why do we have this two-tier system where immigrants seem to be getting let off in some sense and white Brits are being, rounded up and arrested?
Great question. let's look at Manchester Airport and the shenanigans that went on there in July. And using that word is not downplaying anything. Believe you me, I'd have been extremely upset if a female colleague of mine had got her nose broken, or a male colleague, come to that.
Yeah, what happened there, just for those who don't know?
Okay. Initially, a very short clip got released on social media, and it showed a uniformed police officer kicking a man in the head twice and stamping on his head once. It was a 3 or 4 second clip. So, of course, boom, it goes viral. That was all we saw. Got an awful lot of media coverage. I was called upon by a number of different media outlets to comment upon it. And I said, looking at that clip as a standalone clip with no backstory, no context, because we saw nothing that had gone on beforehand, I said, I cannot find a justification for what he did. As a dramatist, somebody who's written plays for the BBC, I could easily come up with a reason that would fit in a TV or radio drama. And so idiotic presenters were saying, oh, well, tell us what that is. And I'm going, of course I won't, because it would just be utterly speculative and it would be the machinations of my dramatist mind. So it wouldn't be helpful in the slightest. But as things stand, no, I can't. Then what happened? So that kind of furore rumbled on for about 3 or 4 days. And then we were given 23 seconds of footage of what went on before. And that showed particularly 2 brown-faced men going berserk and repeatedly assaulting a number of police officers, viciously bashing them, including 2 women police officers, one of whom reportedly had her nose broken, and you can see her getting smashed in the face. And it's utterly appalling and a really, really unpleasant video to watch. And then, of course, the furore just grew from that. And what has happened ever since that is that there's been an investigation into the actions of 4 men at Terminal 2 of Manchester Airport. So, you know, the brown-faced men. And an investigation by the Independent Office of Police Conduct into the actions of the police officer that seemed to do the kicking and the stamping. So 2 investigations. Well, this is over a month on now from these events. And all we've been told is the IOPC are continuing with their investigation, and Greater Manchester Police have sent a file to the CPS. Here's a great 2-tier example for you. Because what's happened to rioters? They have been arrested, charged the same day, in court the following day, and then sentenced. Within almost like less than 48 hours of committing the offence, they're in prison. And yet, Manchester Airport, brown-faced men, clearly seen assaulting police officers, over a month on, no charges yet. Why not? You see, and these kind of situations create a tinderbox atmosphere across many, many people throughout the nation. Because people think, well, what's going on here?
Well, what is going on here? If they are racist, the police, why is it that they seem to be being more lenient? Or is it the courts that are more lenient to minorities?
The police have always got themselves in a dreadful tangle over race, particularly the Met, but other police services. And I think there is a huge fear amongst those who prowl the corridors of policing power that if they are in any way, shape or form deemed or seen to be racist in any way, it will cause enormous disquiet. But we've seen enormous disquiet in the country because I think many people have concerns over immigration, the rise of Islam, a lack of integration, and all those kind of things. Concerns which are held by many millions of law-abiding, decent people who certain politicians would have you believe they're all far-right racist thugs, which is just complete and utter nonsense.
I've got a bit of a theory, so I wonder what you think. And I think it's quite a prominent theory. It's just that the reason politicians and police and all of these people in charge focus so much on this idea of the far right is because it's such an unattractive thing to be in today's day and age, as opposed to 80 years ago in the 1930s, or even maybe in the 70s and 80s. At some points I wasn't born. Right now, that's the most unattractive thing you can be. And it sort of pushes people to be compliant and say, well, I'm not one of those far right people. I'll do whatever Keir Starmer and all that. Do you think that's part of it? Because it does feel like the far right, this idea of the far right, is a bit exaggerated today.
No, I think the lazy, broad brush labelling of people like that is far more sinister than making it an unattractive thing. I think it's a deliberate suppression of free speech. I think it is deliberately putting fear into anybody who has those concerns, which once again, I'll mention, forgive me if I'm sounding like a stuck record, but unfettered illegal immigration into the UK, the rise of Islam, and a lack of integration into the UK. And other people have other slants on it, like the erosion of British values, which I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole because I don't know what British values are. I know many people have their own ideas on it. In fact, I put a thing out on social media a few weeks ago to say, please tell me what you think British values are. It was a brilliant read to see what people were saying.
I suppose democracy, liberalism, the individual liberty, particularly for women, minorities, people being able to live together, work together.
I said I wasn't going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, but I did. I've gone down that rabbit hole. Well, that's what it is. But that is the concern with mass immigration, not small levels of low levels of immigration, but mass immigration so fast and changing and bringing in people who have very different ideas of how to live. And I don't mean to suggest that everybody has to live the way we do in this country, but I want to defend how we live in this country because I quite like it. Maybe that's my bias because I grew up here, but I quite like it. And it is changing in front of a lot of people's eyes, particularly a lot of working class people who live among a lot of the new immigrants who are arriving. It's a huge number of people, and a lot of the middle class elite and the media, they don't get affected too much by this, and they're the ones pushing for it.
No, they don't, because if you go home to your life consists of home to work, at a media outlet, whatever that might be, and then occasionally a bar and home again, and whatever it is you do, you're going to be wholly absorbed by that organisation and any ethos that organisation might pass down and any political leanings that organisation might have, of course. And I'm very fortunate in so much as that for over 20 years, I've been a freelancer, a self-employed freelancer. So as long as the phone keeps ringing, I keep working. And I have broadcast over just about every media outlet in the land. And continue to do so. All right, some don't invite me back, but others do. So be it. But going back to the point that we were talking about, and the making the far right label a very unattractive one. No, I'm utterly convinced it's a very deliberate attempt to suppress free speech, and you've only got to be sitting outside in a beer garden, right, of a pub. Having a cigarette like I frequently do, Prime Minister, until you outlaw that. Yeah. Right?
Just doing it before outside, weren't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know it's smelly and expensive and life shortening and all that kind of stuff.
But you're outside.
I know all that.
I don't smoke, and I hate cigarette smoke. I've never been bothered by people doing it outside.
Yeah.
In a club, I didn't used to like it. I'll be honest about that. I didn't like it. But outside. You know what's sad about the whole far right thing as well? Those people calling people, and I think even Keir Starmer would probably label you and me as far right.
Undoubtedly.
And you've just told me from what, you're very concerned about racism in the force. You've seemed to, what annoys me, here's what annoys me. People say, I'm not racist, I've got black friends or Jewish friends or whatever it is. And that became the thing you're not supposed to say. I've got gay friends. And I think that's really insidious, actually.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was younger, I was, because I was a teenager, I was all righteous and all that. And I remember going to, I think it was my stepmom, and she would say, maybe more conservative opinions than I had. But she would say, like, what are you talking about? I've got loads of black friends. And she actually did have, and I would say, that's the most racist thing you can say, because I was taught to say that to people as a teenager for some reason. And I've realised now, well, if you do have lots of friends, I know that being Jewish myself, if someone has a lot of Jewish friends, they're probably less likely to be racist. I think it's not nothing, is it? It's something.
Of course not.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't know. That became the thing. Oh, you said that. You're in the trap now. You're far right and racist.
Indeed. And I had a little battle with myself on the way here as to whether I was going to talk to you about a conversation I had last night. Okay? The last long conversation I had with anybody before sitting down here with you.
All right.
And it was with a man, a Muslim man, who runs a curry house. Okay? And whilst I was waiting for my curry, he poured me a beer and we had a chat. And I asked this of most Muslim people that I encounter. And I do speak to a lot of Muslim people. Yeah, minicabs, invariably, round my way. The drivers are Muslim, in restaurants and other people that run businesses and all that kind of stuff locally where I live. And I'm always having brilliant conversations with people. And the question that I put last night is, what do I say to people, friends or anybody that I talk to that is concerned about the rise of Islam in the UK? What do I say to them? What can I say to them? Right? And nobody takes offence. No Muslim that I've spoken to has taken offence at that. And last night's conversation was so enlightening. It always is. I'm learning a lot more about Islam through these conversations. And this guy said, my dad came to this country 40 years ago and has run restaurants for 40 years and done very well out of it. Thank you very much. Why on earth would anybody in our family want to change anything?
Yeah. Well, that's him. And good on him.
Yeah.
It's a complicated issue. Sorry,
he said, however, and it is complex, and I'm no great theologian of any faith, so I will stick very much to, keep myself in my box. But he said, and I won't repeat it because I'm not here wildly sow division, but he mentioned a particular group or type of Muslim, not type of Muslim, a particular branch of the faith of Islam. Mm-hmm. And he said, they're the problem. Yeah. They're the problem. He said it all stems from them. And he was very serious about what he was saying. And it was brilliant. And next week we'll be picking up the conversation again, and I will be learning more.
The food was good then, was it?
Wonderful.
I bet it was. This is a fact of I've done work before on Hasidic Judaism, and they have issues in their community. And I get in trouble when I say that because I'm Jewish myself, but I'm an atheist. I'm not involved in that. And I have a similar feeling to that guy you spoke to last night. I go, they're the problem. Israel feels that they are the problem. 20% of their population, they are a problem because they are very religious and they don't see the world the same way we do. They might say we're the problem. Okay, I get it. And so people don't write angry comments. I get it. You have your way of life. That's not my way of life. But there are a lot of issues in that community. And if that community in the UK, it's like, I don't know how many it is. It's in the tens of thousands. It's almost nothing. And if that was in the millions, I would be going out saying we have a bit of an issue with extreme Islam and with Hasidic Judaism. Because there's only a couple, there's thousands of them in England. It's hardly any number at all of Hasidic Jews. It's not a problem right now. But there are extremes of all different kinds. But we are now bringing people in at a rapid pace. And a lot of them have very fervent beliefs. Yes.
And we don't necessarily know the backgrounds of many of these people. But here I am espousing concerns that 1,350 people arrived in the UK on small boats across 3 consecutive days of this week. And because I have concerns about that now, people might call me a race baiter, they might call me racist, they can call me whatever false names they want to, because neither of those aforementioned are true. But speaking as a former police officer, I firmly believe it is the government's primary job to keep its citizens safe.
Yeah.
And if you then allow people who you don't know the background of, you don't know what they're going to go, where they're going to go, you don't know what their intentions are, just to come unfettered into the UK and disperse, then I think that is hugely irresponsible as a government. If that government wants to call me racist for espousing those concerns over the safety of me, my family, and my fellow citizens of the UK, of every race, colour, creed, and sexuality, because I have those concerns on behalf of all of those people, if a stupid government or any politician wants to call me far right or racist, then you go ahead, because you're incorrect. But what you actually are, for as long as you allow that to happen, you are grossly incompetent and hugely irresponsible.
No, absolutely. I mean, well said. But what would you say when they say no, actually, no, you know what, going back to what you're saying, we need a new word, because this idea of race is just ridiculous. Because again, we've clarified that you don't seem to see color. Color is whatever. There doesn't seem to be any issue. I haven't heard you mention, or I haven't mentioned Sikhism or Hinduism or anything like that. There seems to be an issue of one particular belief system, and we don't have blasphemy laws in this country. Well, apparently, I said this to a friend of mine who's a lawyer, and they said we do. So I need to check into that. Apparently, there are blasphemy laws in terms of you're not supposed to have a go at someone's religion in the workplace.
No, there's hate crime laws.
But is that a hate crime to criticise Christianity, Judaism, or Islam in a workplace?
You can go to Speaker's Corner at Hyde Park, but you probably need to take a security team with you if you're going to criticise certain faiths.
Well, that's the issue.
But you can be, you can. We do not, as it speak, have a criminal. Blasphemy is not a criminal offence. There are, of course, hate crimes around, saying something
the workplace,
HR to someone.
HR might get rid of you because you've said something about someone's belief.
Yeah.
I mean, one group of people who is particularly worried about immigrants is immigrants. I mean, immigrants come to this country, first, second generation, and they're thinking, bloody hell, people are coming in a lot quicker than I thought. There's that feeling of sort of wanting to close the door. That's always been the case as well. I mean, my great grandparents were immigrants, I think, but they were often the most worried about more immigrants coming in because they know what it is and they know those concerns. I think you're absolutely right. I can see your anger and your passion because you're being called something which, as I say, is not just unattractive but an abhorrent thing to be called in today's age, and it's just utterly not true. What about Tommy Robinson? He's now the bogeyman, isn't he? He's like Voldemort. I don't know if you know Harry Potter, but he's the Voldemort. He's the bad guy. To what extent, I mean, is he really pulling the strings for huge far-right movements from his sun lounger in wherever he is?
He has a large following on social media. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly his words and his thoughts are consumed by a considerable number of people.
Mm-hmm.
He is a damaged brand, of course, because he has criminal convictions and that kind of stuff. But many people are now kind of looking at him as some kind of de facto freedom fighter for free speech and such like. In a similar kind of way that so many people look towards Nigel Farage, and 4.1 million people voted for the Reform Party at the last general election. What I would really like to see, and I absolutely mean this from the bottom of my heart, is I would like to see less two-party politics, less deliberately sown division by politicians. And they deliberately sow division because they divide and conquer. And look what a two-party first-past-the-post electoral system does in the UK. It merely perpetuates that. What I would love to see from somewhere is a nation builder. Somebody who wants to build a nation. Somebody who does not have baggage, convictions, a backstory that can be ripped asunder and you know how the media, certain sections of the media do, but a real, true nation builder who loves the Muslim man who runs the curry house as much as he loves the Ugandan Asian who got booted out by Idi Amin and has run the local newsagent for the last 45 years, as much as he loves the French guy that runs that wonderful bistro down the road, as much as he loves his Jewish friend who, I don't know, he goes on a podcast with, you know what I mean, right? Yeah.
You were worried about saying a stereotype for the Jewish friend.
And on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Yeah. And on and on and on.
Yeah.
And a nation builder who so loves the nation that they will not allow unfettered immigration to continue. They will be courageous enough to stand up and say, actually, I want to protect the people of this great nation, because it is still a wonderful nation, but there are so many concerns that law-abiding, decent, tax-paying, right-minded people who raise brilliant kids have, that is being shut down. There is so much division being sown. We are being drawn apart, when I know that so many people, for example, that will go on a pro-Palestine march, I bet I could sit down with every single person from that march and have a very civil conversation where we express concerns about the state of our public services, for example, our hospitals, our education, our roads, our policing. I bet we'd have so much in common about all those kind of things.
But that person you described, apart from the beginning about the backstory, does fit Tommy Robinson, I think. Because I thought for years, and I think so many people thought this, that he was just an out-and-out racist, that he was a proud racist, far right and all this stuff. And I started looking it up because I wanted to interview him at some point, which I haven't yet done. But I thought I have to have some stuff where I can push back and go, come on, mate, you shouldn't have said this and that. And I couldn't really find much. And people who are watching this, correct me if I'm wrong, show me some stuff, some links where he really said something that is attacking someone for their immutable features, the skin color, ethnicity, that kind of thing, instead of for their beliefs. I couldn't find a single thing. Yeah. So I don't know anymore. And when someone like that has been made out to be the evil guy, and of course he shouldn't have been getting into the scraps he got into. I think that's the big issue there, isn't it? And some of his associates, people he's associated with.
Yeah, and he has criminal convictions.
Well, I think didn't he punch a Nazi? Someone said earlier. I might be miss whatever.
I don't have whatever convictions he's got. And of course, I think he's currently held in contempt of the High Court. I might be wrong on that front. But, there is baggage that he will simply never be able to shift.
No.
And I so want a nation builder, an idol, a unifier.
Would Farage not lay claim to that?
Well, perhaps if we had proportional representation at a next general election, but of course no turkey's going to vote for Christmas, are they? So that won't get through this government.
Yeah.
Not in a month of Sundays.
This is an issue because to become Prime Minister, you've got to do, because I had a sort of joking conversation with my wife the other week where I said, you know what, I should be Prime Minister. And she said, yeah, but you don't want to do all the boring bits before. You've got to, it's not like a president. A president can just go, you know what, I'm going to do this thing. Yeah. You've got to go and be the MP of such and such, a local council. You've got to do all this stuff, work for decades. By the time you get to the point where you're Prime Minister, you've been so affected by this cultish ideology of groupthink that you're never going to come in and really do something interesting.
The Westminster bubble.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of my time in green rooms, in and around studios that are not very far from Westminster. And so I spend time with former special advisors, for example, none of whom I find to be very special and none of whom I would take advice from, I hasten to add. And it does kind of fascinate me as to why politicians would have even have countenanced that, but there you go. That whole Westminster bubble, that echo chamber type thing. And I've met people that are so unworldly, politicians, and they haven't got a clue about what's out there, what everyday people are going through, about their concerns, about travelling on public transport, for example, and being in fear of your own safety and the such like, and other issues that go on and on and on. They have no idea or comprehension of it. They just fall into that political kind of pathway, get into that Westminster bubble, in a very similar way to how senior police officers operate within an echo chamber, where all they ever hear is what they want to hear, as opposed to what they should really be hearing, because, of course, the organisation doesn't want dissenting views and alternative ideas put forward. So, yeah, senior police, politicians and all of that, they're in bubbles, they're in echo chambers, and they really, really could do with coming out onto the streets of Britain and getting some proper experience, far away from the media gaze, far away from the pre-rehearsed or pre-organised kind of meetings with unelected community leaders and all that kind of nonsense, when they just get fed by people with an agenda. They just want to come out and see what is really going on.
Speaking of an agenda, how would you feel if you were a police officer working the beat now, and you're told, right, we've got to go down to this person's house because their 16-year-old son has put an offensive Facebook post up, we've got to go and arrest him?
I'd say, under what act and section are we going to make this arrest? And may I see the evidence, please? Because I, for one, do not want to partake in an unlawful arrest. Show me the evidence, show me the act and section that it breaches, and then we'll have a conversation.
People are being arrested, and they're going to prison for speech. And some of it is inciting violence, isn't it?
Yeah. And there are some people out there saying utterly stupid, idiotic things. But there is also an inherent dishonesty amongst certain sections of the media, because they are pumping out headlines which say, for example, man jailed after shouting at police. Right now, shouting at the police is not a criminal offence, depending on what you shout. Okay, it's really not a criminal offence. It just simply isn't.
What if you say, like, fuck off to a police officer?
You might irritate them, and that would be a bit of a daft thing to say, for example. But if you shouted at a police officer a line of Shakespeare, whatever that may be, or, you shouted the alphabet at them, you are still allowed to shout at the police. And I'm choosing extreme examples here, but, it's not a crime. But when you read that headline, man jailed after shouting at police, people think, and they read it as man jailed for shouting at police. And then when you read the article, you'll find that the shouting at the police officer was only a very small part of other idiotic things that they did, which then rightfully led to their arrest and them being imprisoned. But there's a dishonesty in that headline.
That's true.
And that is part of that. So shut down that conversation. Let's not sit in a beer garden tonight, in a packed beer garden, having an open, frank, honest, respectful conversation about the concerns that we have.
Yeah.
Because they don't want that. They don't want those conversations being had, because I'm sure they know that beyond the 4.1 million people that voted for reform at the last election, there are millions upon millions of people harbouring those concerns.
There was that. Did you see there was that? I think it was a young girl, an autistic girl, who said that the policewoman looked like the
lesbian Nana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's going on?
I mean, that was just an appalling example of heavy-handed, ridiculous police action. But of course, we have so many police officers now on the front line who are very inexperienced, and they are not being showed how to do the job by experienced cops, because the age of austerity, the Cameron and Osborne and the Theresa May, who carries so much responsibility for the destruction of British policing, that woman, worst thing ever to happen to British policing. All that austerity, people knew what was coming down the line, so they were heading for the exit door, and they're trying to get them in through the front door at a rate of knots these days, but they simply can't recruit in sufficient numbers. They can't retain. Last year, resignations outstripped retirements. So people that met their actual due retirement date to collect their pension were outnumbered by people resigning because they're just going, phew, I've had enough of this job, thank you very much.
Man, it is a complicated one with regards to speech, isn't it? But I mean, do you think?
No, it's not.
Go on.
It's really not. We can still speak freely, but you've got to be thoughtful about what you say.
Well, that's what makes it complicated.
No. We've all got a pretty firm handle, I would imagine, right? And I'm sure your audience are very bright and absolutely know what would be legal to say and what would be illegal to say. We've all got a pretty firm handle on that, haven't we? We can sit in a bar. You can sit at the end of Downing Street having a cigarette while you can, right, saying Keir Starmer is an idiot. Keir Starmer is an oppressor, right? And you can't be nicked for that. By the same token, you can say the Tories ruined this country through 14 years of misrule, each and every one of them, while you're having a cigarette in a pub garden, while we can, right?
Yeah.
You can say all of these things. You can say, I am sick to the back teeth of boatloads of people washing up on the shores of Dover with people in them who we simply don't know who they are. And I am deeply concerned at how much that is costing. I am deeply concerned because I never hear how strident the checks on these people are. And what I do see is articles in the paper sometimes where failed asylum seekers have gone on to commit very serious crimes, including murder. You can say all of that.
But you might get arrested.
No, I'm not going to get arrested for saying that. I haven't broken the law. I haven't broken the law in any way, shape or form.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen people getting arrested for saying, okay, for example, that trans women are not women. I've seen, there was that Irish fella, I know we're talking about a different country, there's an Irish fella at the moment going through that, a similar kind of thing. Police investigating, police coming over and saying, we want to investigate you for Facebook comments.
Well, yes, but everything that I just said, I could say on Facebook. I'm saying on a very public platform now, your podcast.
Let's see how well the video does.
Well, you're
right.
Said, there's not going to be any police officers beating a path to my door to arrest me because it would be an unlawful arrest. Be completely unlawful because I have not broken the law. So I'm concerned about this kind of people saying, free speech is being eroded, we can't say that anymore. No, I'd far rather that we sensibly, politely, respectfully say the things that concern us, so long as we don't say ridiculous, stupid, obviously illegal things.
Well, some people would say it's a hate crime to say to a trans woman, you're not a woman. But you should be able to say that if it's your belief.
Yeah, but you see, I don't really want to get into a conversation with a trans woman.
But someone might.
Yeah, someone might do.
And then they might get arrested for a hate crime.
But if you were to see someone that was clearly or obviously trans, right? Unless it's in a work environment where I sort of have to speak to that person, they're not somebody I would choose to speak to. So I wouldn't choose to have a conversation with him if I was sat on a train. I'm far more likely to have a conversation with a bloke who's clearly been on the tools all day, has got his grubby trousers and boots on.
Well, that's your prerogative, isn't it? But somebody else might say, hey, this trans, but I've been speaking back and forth with, maybe we're friends, but I'm now saying to you, you're not a woman. You can't come in these toilets.
Well, it's not my specialist subject. I do not want people with penises in the same toilet as my wife. I really don't. Right?
I think you can get arrested for that if someone reported it for saying that. But
well, we'll see. It's in your podcast.
Well, imagine it happening now. But I suppose it's not gone out live, has it?
No,
so.
but you know, that's I'm expressing a personal preference. When my wife goes to the bathroom in public, in a public toilet, wherever that may be, whether it be in a shop, a bar, a restaurant, my preference is not to have people with penises in the same bathroom.
But people with penises are women now.
Well, I'm sticking to what I just said. That's my preference.
That's fair enough. There've been videos with the police sort of dancing at with LGBT people. What are your thoughts on that? And also, did you have a bit of a tiff? There's a influencer guy called Jack Maate or something who I came across when I was searching for you, and I think you had a bit of a tiff.
Jack Maate, an influencer. Well.
I don't know. What is he?
Anyway,
what is he?
He's a YouTuber. He's a YouTuber. He's a young fella who's done very well for himself. And he invited me onto his podcast 3 times, I think.
Well, that's nice.
And it really did good numbers. So that was very good for him. And I had an enjoyable time with him and his sidekick and all that sort of stuff. Actually, I got to go and have a pint with a guy called Robbie Knox, who was a really enjoyable fellow to have a couple of pints with.
Oh.
Anyway, and then at one point, Jack Maate posted on social media that he was struggling with his mental health.
Oh.
So I reached out to him via a direct message to see how he was. I've had 2 catastrophic mental health breakdowns in my time. So I'm on red alert as to people, having mental health issues. And I don't mean a bit of stress because it's hard at work or this, that and the other, and I don't mean a bit of anxiety because of something that, anyway, moving on. Back to Jack Maate. And so I reached out to message him directly, privately, when I knew he was struggling with his mental health. Unfortunately, it wasn't an episode that lasted very long and wasn't particularly serious, and I was glad that he was over it fairly quickly and back in the full swing of work and all of that. So then, at one point, I decided to have a bit of a pop at some police officers who'd been dancing, maybe at a pride event or something, and they looked ridiculous. Now, if I am policing a pride event, I'm going to tell the organisers or whoever it is, whatever steward that I'm going to be working with or any of that I'm old enough to remember the dreadful bombing of the Admiral Duncan in Soho, for example, and the other murderous acts that abominable piece of garbage that I'm not even going to mention talked about. We can look further afield to look at appalling, clearly homophobic murders, bombings and the such like on the gay community. If I'm any part of policing a gay event, I'm going to say to the organisers or the stewards, I won't be dancing, I won't be holding hands, I won't be having my face painted, but I absolutely guarantee you that me and my colleagues, from the very start of us coming to work to the very moment we are stood down at the conclusion of the event, we will be at our most vigilant throughout, and we will do everything within our professional capacity to ensure that you and your friends do not get hurt and have a good time. I'm not here to be a part of your event. I am here to protect your event, and I am willing, as are my colleagues, if need be, to lay down our lives for your event, because that's what police officers do. They run towards danger while you, I hope, will all be running away from it. And I can't be at my most professional, at my most vigilant and alert if I'm dancing the fucking Macarena.
Jack said he felt it was a way for police to sort of bridge divides with the community.
Yeah.
I thought that was a bit naive because there are all sorts of people with different beliefs. I think you need to have a society. I don't know if it's controversial to say this. I'm Jewish. I think if people want to be anti-Semitic in their heads, they need to be, and they need to live their lives. If people are, maybe they don't like gay stuff because they're Catholic or they're living their lives, gay people, and I just think the thing with Pride in particular, a lot of gay people themselves don't like Pride. They find it insulting. It's degrading. It's dancing and being silly, whereas they see it as being gay as a dignified sexuality. They want to just be treated like anyone else. They don't want to do all this silly dancing and stuff like that. A lot of them don't want trans people to be part of it. So by dancing with them, it is a political act. That's what I'm trying to get at with that Jack Mate. I don't think understood there.
Yeah. So back to Jack Mate.
Yeah.
When I had a pop on social media at these police officers behaving very unprofessionally, in my view, he then had a go at me publicly, right? And of course, he's got a following that far outstrips mine in terms of numbers.
Was he having a go though?
Oh, yeah. He had a proper go at me.
Listen,
right?
mate.
Yeah, all of that kind of nonsense, right? Really dug me out. Of course, why? For likes and retweets. That's why he did it. Now, when he had an issue, I contacted him privately because I reached out to try and help. And I come from a school of thought that if you have a dispute with a mate or somebody who's a colleague, you do that privately.
Yeah.
You don't go and do it in the middle of the market square, do you?
No.
You do it privately. And I thought that was really, really poor on his behalf. And I let him know it publicly because he started it.
Yeah.
And then it blew up into a typical social media spat. None, of course, of which is remotely important. None of it's important. It's not. It's just faff. It's just nonsense.
It's stuff to read before we all die.
Yeah. Well, I've got other things to do before I die.
I don't. So before, I've got one more question for you. But first, tell me, where can people go and find all your stuff?
Oh, well, peterbleckley.com or my books that are all available as paperbacks or audio books. And I, of course, narrate my own books. They're all on Amazon, for example, Peter Bleksley books, and you'll find them. And I'm on social media. Predominantly, I'm on X, formerly Twitter. That's where I tend to do stuff. But I've got no more room for any more Facebook friends.
No.
Because they only let you have 5,000 or something.
Bloody hell, mate.
So that's no good on there. Insta, I do a bit on Insta, a little bit on TikTok and all of that. But primarily, I'm more likely to engage on X.
As Jack Mate now knows. So who's a heretic you admire?
Love this question. A man that I fear you have never heard of.
Mm-hmm. Probably.
And I fear your audience have not heard of him.
Even better.
But you need to. His name is Neil Woods.
Oh, I know of Neil Woods, but go on.
He's a former undercover cop like me.
Yep.
But whilst I operated at the wholesale and the global kind of level, Neil very courageously operated at street level, buying horrible £10 bags off of skagheads and all that kind of stuff. He was subjected to horrendous violence.
Wow.
He was an astonishingly courageous man. A bit like myself, he's had mental health issues, understandably, as a result of the work. Mm-hmm. But primarily, what he is now is arguably the country's leading drug law reformer.
Oh, wow.
Campaigning tirelessly and endlessly for drug law reform. Because Neil, like me, knows that the war on drugs cannot and will not ever be won. Please reach out to Neil Woods. Not only is he a heretic, he's a hero of mine, and he'd be a brilliant guest, I'm sure.
Interesting. He wasn't involved in the undercover special force that infiltrated left-wing activists and married them.
No, he wasn't. No, he most definitely wasn't.
No, that wasn't him.
You'll be thinking of a guy called, who I think publicly is known as Peter Francis.
Oh, maybe.
I think that's who you're thinking of.
They're all footballers as well, these names.
But Neil Woods is a great fella. You can find him on LinkedIn.
I'll have a look. Yeah. Well, that's a great heretic. Yeah. Thank you so much.
He
and
really
people,
is.
Please do go follow Peter Bletchley. We'll put all the links in the description below. He's given us his time. Go click on all the things, get hold of his books. Keep watching this channel, hit the like, and watch something right here.